Howdy, my name is Daxio, and this is Plugged In News. And in today's pin update, we have mass protests kick off in Paris after France's constitutional court approves controversial COVID legislation, as well as Biden administration mandates coronavirus vaccines for White House visitors and journalists. And before we get into it, I didn't upload yesterday. There wasn't really that much news, and today there's really not that much news. Like big news that's happening, just a lot of vaccine mandates and stuff like that. So let's get right into it. All right, and for the first story today, this comes from RT.com. There's no author, but it is mass protests kick off in Paris after France's constitutional court approves controversial COVID legislation. And obviously, last week I reported on this about the protests and stuff in France, and now they're still going on because of what France just did. So let's read a little bit more. Reinvigorated mass protests kicked off in the French capital shortly after the country's top court upheld controversial legislation which made a coronavirus health pass mandatory for the general public. Hundreds of protesters marched through the streets of Paris on Thursday heading towards the Constitutional Court. The judicial body ruled on the COVID legislation package earlier in the day. The court rejected some of the proposed law, including a provision allowing French authorities to enforce mandatory quarantine on any person who tested positive for the virus. However, the court upheld the majority of the legislation, including the compulsory vaccination of caregivers and the health pass, as constitutional. A large crowd of protesters gathered by the court, expressing their anger over the ruling. The court itself was cordoned off, with heavy police presence in the area, as shown in the footage below. The protesters chanted various slogans, including "Macron, we don't want your pass," referring to one of the most criticized provisions of the law. The legislation, expected to be enacted on Monday, is set to make the so-called health passes mandatory in France, barring anyone without them from restaurants, bars, and other public venues. This story, just wanted to share this because I reported on it last week. They were protesting over it because they didn't want it at first. Now it finally got into the courts, and look where it's at. We got mandatory vaccine passports there in France. All right, and for the next story today, this is coming from Breitbart by Catherine Hamilton, and it is Biden administration mandates coronavirus vaccines for White House visitors and journalists. Let's get right into it. And it goes on to read, the Biden administration will begin mandating Chinese coronavirus vaccines for all White House visitors, including journalists, on August 8th, according to an email from the White House Communications Agency President Stephen Portnoy. The Biden administration is now imposing a similar requirement for all visitors to the White House beginning this coming Sunday, per the below memo from the White House. All who enter the complex are being asked to fill out the attached form attesting to their vaccination status, according to the email, which CNN Oliver Darcy tweeted on Friday. The requirement will include journalists, Portnoy continued. WCHA obtained vaccination numbers by asking members of the press corps to confidentially share their vaccination status earlier this year. While 99.6% of more than 500 survey respondents reportedly already have the vaccine, the administration said anyone unvaccinated must be tested at their own expense at Jackson Place or show proof of a same-day test to enter the White House, the email states. The new proof of vaccination requirement follows the administration's vaccine mandate for all federal employees and contractors. At this time, President Joe Biden lashed out and blamed the unvaccinated for the pandemic, Breitbart News previously reported. We have a pandemic because of the unvaccinated, and they're sowing enormous confusion, he said to reporters in late July, adding, if those other 100 million got vaccinated, we'd be in a very different world. The Biden administration has continued to increase its public support of the vaccine mandates. The White House is even reportedly considering withholding federal dollars to private businesses as part of its latest push to get more Americans to take the coronavirus vaccine. I'm guessing sooner or later at some point, America is probably going to require vaccine passports for most indoor places. I mean, they're already doing it in New York, or they're already trying to do it in New York, so most likely they're going to do it in other major cities and stuff like that, and it's just going to look super authoritarian, super fascist, etc. If you don't have the vaccine, you can't live your life the way you want to because of a 99.6% survival rate. Anyways, if you do want to get the vaccine, make sure you ask your doctor before. Anyways, that's it for today. If you did enjoy, drop a like, drop a sub down below, drop a comment, let me know how I'm doing, let me know what I can do to improve, and don't forget to stay plugged in. Peace out, boys.